Deep within ancient sacred halls, shadowed secrets have lingered for centuries behind golden altars and whispered prayers. Faith possesses an extraordinary power to heal human souls, yet when distorted by blind authority, it turns into a subtle chain. What happens when devotion is weaponized against the believers themselves? Today, we uncover the hidden truths that reshape everything we thought we knew about spiritual control. For generations, sincere seekers have entered sacred grounds seeking comfort, redemption, and eternal hope. They bring their deepest vulnerabilities, trusting those who claim to speak directly for the divine. But beneath the surface of grand ceremonies lies a delicate threshold where spiritual leadership can quietly shift from compassionate guidance to absolute psychological dominance over innocent hearts. Fear is one of the most potent instruments ever used to govern human consciousness within religious institutions. By painting the outside world as pure darkness and damnation, leaders create a fortress of anxiety. Believers begin to fear their own doubts, believing that questioning authority is equivalent to betraying God himself, leaving them trapped inside silent prisons. Consider the history of ancient empires where sacred texts were kept strictly locked away from the common public. When individuals are forbidden or discouraged from reading scripture for themselves, they become entirely dependent on intermediaries. This deliberate withholding of knowledge creates a dangerous monopoly on truth, making ordinary people vulnerable to subtle exploitation and deceit. In many isolated communities, obedience is demanded under the guise of holy righteousness and sacred covenant. Those in power often claim divine mandate, positioning themselves beyond critique or accountability. When a follower dares to ask honest questions, they are frequently met with shame, social isolation, or direct threats of spiritual exile, breaking their emotional spirit completely. Financial exploitation has historically worn the pious mask of mandatory devotion and sacrificial giving. Across various eras, promises of heavenly blessings or divine healing have been sold for material wealth. Vulnerable believers part with their life savings, trusting that financial sacrifice will purchase divine favor, while lavish leaders accumulate vast earthly kingdoms. The psychological toll of spiritual manipulation creates a profound internal conflict that tears apart a person's identity. Victims often experience severe cognitive dissonance, attempting to reconcile their genuine love for God with the visible cruelty of human leaders. This silent suffering often leads to quiet despair, making them feel utterly abandoned in the dark. Group dynamic mechanisms within insular religious environments reinforce strict conformity through collective pressure. When an entire social structure rewards blind compliance and penalizes independent thought, individuality gradually dissolves. Friends and family members often become the primary enforcers of this rigid doctrine, prioritizing organizational loyalty over genuine familial love and human empathy. Propaganda and weaponized guilt are frequently deployed to keep followers perpetually feeling unworthy and spiritually flawed. By convincing individuals that their natural human emotions are inherently sinful, leaders position themselves as the sole source of absolution. This perpetual cycle of guilt and partial forgiveness ensures total, lifelong dependency upon the religious structure. History reveals how high-profile scandals are often swept under ornate rugs to protect organizational reputation over vulnerable human lives. When institutions value their image more than truth and justice, victims are silenced and discredited. This systemic protection of abusers creates a toxic legacy that deeply wounds the very essence of true faith. When tragic events occur, corrupt spiritual leaders often reframe suffering as personal sin or insufficient faith. Instead of offering genuine comfort, they place the blame entirely onto the victim. This cruel theological gaslighting leaves grieving individuals feeling utterly forsaken, wondering why their prayers seem to echo into an empty, silent void. The distortion of apocalyptic prophecies is another powerful tactic used to maintain urgent, high-stakes compliance. By instilling constant apocalyptic panic, leaders create a state of perpetual emergency. Followers are urged to surrender their earthly assets, personal ambitions, and rational judgment to prepare for imminent judgment, completely surrendering control of their futures. Yet, despite the overwhelming shadows of spiritual abuse, the human spirit inherently yearns for authentic light and freedom. Throughout history, courageous individuals have dared to step back from toxic dogma to re-examine the core teachings of genuine love. This pivotal awakening marks the beginning of a profound journey toward true spiritual liberation. True spirituality was never intended to be a weapon of control, fear, or financial extortion. When we examine sacred scriptures objectively, we discover a consistent message of unconditional love, justice, and personal peace. Deconstructing human traditions allows seekers to separate man-made corruption from the timeless, pure essence of divine truth. Walking away from an abusive religious environment requires immense courage and emotional resilience. It often means leaving behind familiar communities, lifelong friends, and established routines. Yet, standing in the open air of personal freedom allows individuals to rebuild their relationship with God on a foundation of honesty, grace, and authentic understanding. Healing from spiritual trauma begins when one realizes that God is not defined by human gatekeepers. The Creator of the universe does not demand blind subjugation to corrupt leaders or institutional greed. True divine nature is reflected in mercy, truth, and freedom, offering a soothing sanctuary for weary souls seeking genuine peace. Rediscovering prayer outside institutional control transforms communication with the divine into an intimate, heartfelt dialogue. No longer bound by rigid scripts or performative displays, prayer becomes a quiet sanctuary of honest emotion. In this sacred space, doubts are welcomed, pain is acknowledged, and true spiritual restoration quietly begins to take root. The Psalms themselves frequently capture this raw human struggle, expressing profound grief, honest anger, and ultimate hope. They remind us that questioning, wrestling, and weeping in the presence of God are holy acts. Authentic faith embraces our human reality rather than forcing us into artificial masks of perfection and forced submission. As the fog of manipulation clears, light begins to permeate the darkest corners of the human heart. Reclaiming your personal faith means recognizing that your worth was never tied to institutional approval. You are free to seek truth, love unconditionally, and live in harmony with the peaceful wisdom of timeless spiritual grace. Healthy spiritual communities celebrate critical thinking, transparency, and unconditional compassion. In these uplifting spaces, leadership serves rather than dominates, and questions are met with thoughtful dialogue rather than condemnation. Finding such a community helps restore broken trust and demonstrates the beauty of collaborative, humble faith in action. Exposing the dark side of religious belief is not an attack on faith, but a necessary purification. By shining a clear light on hidden corruption, we protect the vulnerable and honor the true essence of spiritual wisdom. Truth sets us free from human tyranny and restores divine integrity to our sacred journeys. If you have ever felt disillusioned, controlled, or deeply hurt by rigid religious dogma, know that your spiritual journey is far from over. True peace does not reside in magnificent stone cathedrals or coercive doctrines, but within a quiet, humble heart aligned with divine truth, unconditional love, and everlasting freedom. Let your spirit rest in the absolute assurance that God's love is completely boundless, unearned, and free from human manipulation. Step forward boldly into the light of spiritual discernment, guided by wisdom and shielded by truth. The path of authentic faith leads away from fear and directly into the tranquil, healing presence of divine grace. As we return to where our journey began, looking back at the ancient sacred halls and golden altars, we see them with clear eyes. No longer blinded by fear or human authority, we step forward into complete spiritual liberation, carrying the pure, untamed light of authentic faith into a world ready for genuine divine truth.